Hello everyone. Today I thought I would do something different because it's raining. This is my front driveway and I wanted to share with you what it's really like living on property with a shared driveway or shared roadway. I built my kids what I call a teenscape when they were younger so they could have time with their friends out in the backyard. I put some table and chairs back there. I couldn't afford to make a proper deck or a proper floor, so to speak. So I just basically covered the area with some fake grass and some outdoor carpets. And that way they could have some privacy, hanging out with their friends. When I first built this section up, I have relatives that have landscaping equipment and they came with backhoes and they built that little mini retaining wall. That was just one big slope on the grounds. This is my property line here where you see the stone wall, and beyond that is open space. It's nice and quiet here. I have my bag on the tree. I have some pretty ledge. I don't have any neighbors that side of my property until you get down into the neighborhood, and then I have neighbors down in the neighborhood area. I had to put up a fence though because of some issues with a hoarding situation next door that got out of hand. It was a farm. I grew up here. This was actually where the bull was. His name was Socks. He used to like to take his head and roll the rocks off of the stone wall, and that's what he played with every day. We had a bunch of chickens. We had a chicken coop. We had pigs. We had horses. My grandfather actually trained horses to do tricks. I wish I had that on video today. My favorite part about being on old farmland is all of the wildflowers that come up. A lot of these I've never planted, they just come up on their own. I think they're so pretty. Here's another cute little flower. Look at the fall colors already popping out. It's not so much on the trees yet, but every now and then you'll see something change in color already. I still have roses blooming. It started pouring as I was filming, so I had to run under my carport to take shelter. What you may not know about shared driveways, also known as right-of-ways. The rain has started to really come down. It's pouring, but we really need it. We didn't have much rain all summer, which is very unusual for this area. These flowers here have been really drought resistant. I didn't finish my landscaping this year. I started some videos on it and then it either got too hot or I was sick and I wasn't able to finish doing my yard work. There are a couple of houses that share this particular road. If I were to build a house again, I would not build where there's a shared driveway situation. One of the things that can happen is if somebody blocks you in, the police do not consider it a criminal matter, they consider it a civil matter, and you may be stuck there until you can get help in civil court. Now that's been my experience. Somebody else may come on here and say, well, that's not my experience. I've always been able to have the police intervene. One time in the middle of the night, one of the neighbors put up a metal gate with a lock at the end of the road, and I was stuck. I couldn't get out of the road. There was no way I could get past that gate because there's neighbors at the end of the road here, and the gate was right up to each of their fences. There was no way to get around the gate. You couldn't even walk around the gate. I called the police. I said, I am trapped. I am stuck. Someone put up a gate at the end of my road and I can't get out. And the police would not come out. They told me it's a civil matter and I have to take it up in court. I was shocked. In addition, someone else was trying to get in, and because they couldn't get in the driveway, they actually parked in front of the gate. So it just made it compounded worse off, because now you have somebody parked in front of the gate. Even if the gate were to open, you still can't get out of the property. That's probably an extreme situation. I highly doubt that happens often. I knew a man who had a shared driveway situation. It was a dirt road that split into like a fork. And on the other side of the fork, his neighbor would park vehicles that they didn't use very much. But then one time an oil company tried to get up there or something, and they blocked the whole portion of the road that was a shared road. And this guy was stuck on his property for hours trying to get the oil tanker to move out of his way. So these things, while they sound extreme, they can happen with a shared driveway situation. Another situation I found myself in quite a few times, actually, this isn't just a one of. Anytime somebody moves into the neighborhood down below here, because I'm back up on a hill, they don't respect the opening to our road. This is a private road, and what ends up happening is they park right in front of the road. One time I was leaving the property to go out to eat. I had reservations, and as I approached the end of my road, the neighbor to my right had a party, and his guests had parked on the road and around the block. There was no way to get off of the road at all. I was stuck at the end of my road. So I got out of my car and I was heading over to him to tell him, because I saw him out in the front yard. He had guests out there as well, and he just flipped out at me, and he told me too bad his guests needed a place to park. There is actually a park right around the corner, and it has a huge double parking lot. Like, it overfills into another parking lot. People can park there for free. There's no problem with that. Nobody has an issue with that. But instead, he chose to allow his guests to park on my road. And when I tried to say something like, hey, I'm just trying to get in and out of my road, I'm not trying to cause a problem, he flipped out at me, and his wife came out of the house and started telling him to get the cars moved, to be respectful. And that was pretty scary, because I wasn't anticipating that the guy would be such a hothead. I need access in and out of here. This is the only way in and out. This is a dead end up here. I did tell him that if I ever had an emergency and I had to have fire trucks or an ambulance up here, they would just smash through the cars. They won't care. He never did that again, but that's another example of something that can happen when you have a shared road situation. I've also had people walk up and down the road here thinking that it's a park. There is a sign. The person who owns the right of way put up the sign. That person lives way back in the woods here next to me. They put up a sign that said, no trespassing private property. People either choose to ignore it or don't read it. At one time, a new neighbor moved in, and I was leaving to go to work, and she was walking her dog out in my yard, like in my front yard where I grow my flowers and everything. I was very polite, and I said, hello, I just want you to know this is actually my front yard. Why are you walking your dog in my yard? And she said, oh, I thought it was a town park. I didn't know it was your yard. And there's a mailbox here, and there's a no trespassing sign. And she said, oh, I'm from an inner city. We don't have yards. So I thought this was a park. After hearing her explanation, I was like, okay, well, that's kind of silly. That's a one-of thing. I probably will never encounter that again. However, they moved, and then new people moved in. And when they moved in, they would bring their dogs over here to run around. And at the time, I had a border collie and a pit bull. I didn't need the drama. I didn't need to come out of my house one day walking my dogs to be confronted by two bull mastiffs that are running around my front yard. And I love dogs. I love all dogs. But it's not okay to just walk your dog in somebody else's property. So at that point, I politely explained to them, this is my yard. I don't know why you're letting your dogs, because they have their own yard, why you're letting your dogs run around my property. But I ended up going to a hardware store that morning, and I bought one of these big tools that pounds stakes into the ground, and I put up a chicken wire. I thought that would stop it. I also put up private property signs along that chicken wire fence, and I didn't want to have to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. But it was because I didn't want somebody walking their dog to interfere with me walking mine on my own property and have an issue. When it snows or any inclement weather, I had to go out and buy a very expensive snowblower because the owner, they don't plow. They just ride their cars through it, no matter how deep the snow is. I've seen it almost a foot high here, and they just don't leave their house. Well, that's not practical for anybody. Sometimes you have to leave your house. You got to work, you got an appointment or whatever. You got to get out of here. Because they don't plow it, I had to go and buy my own snowblower. The deed for everybody except me up here has a provision that everybody shares in the maintenance and expenses of the driveway, but because my house was built last and I'm on the end of the road, they didn't put that provision in my deed because I don't have to drive up the entire length of this huge driveway. This property goes back 6 acres. And then there's other people, like I said, that live up in the back in the woods. Because I don't have that much of the driveway, they didn't put that provision in my deed. However, I always share in sweeping off hickory nuts on the driveway in the summertime. I always share in the snow plowing, the snow shoveling, after storms when there's wash away of the gravel, and the neighbor up the hill has a dirt road. So he gets a lot of wash down from rainstorms, and I go out there and clean that up. I'm always helping. I pick up sticks after a storm, that sort of thing. I've never not helped. But there is no provision in my specific deed about that. That's another point. If you are considering buying a piece of property with a shared road, you really need to read the deed and see what the provisions are and what you're required to do in the event there's snow or damage to the road, or who pays to tar it, those types of things. You really want to know that up front before buying property with a shared road, because that can become very, very costly, especially if you have to tar a road. That's extremely expensive these days. So you just want to protect yourself and know what your rights are and what you're expected to do and what your deed dictates that you do on that property. There's also mowing. I always mow the right-of-way here. The right-of-way is so many feet back from the actual road onto my property. And I always make sure I mow it. Now, when I got new neighbors up here, they told me, oh, don't worry, we have a ride-on tractor, because I don't. I have a push mower. But the thing is, the right-of-way in my yard are one piece of land. When they mowed it once, they screwed it up. They made big dirt divots. They didn't mow it evenly. It looked crappy. So I was like, you know what? I'll do it. And they appreciate that. They see that it's getting done, and they leave me alone about it. But that's another consideration. Prior to them doing that, I had a relative living here next to me, and he was psycho about it. He would come over into my yard and mow my flowers down or mow my garden down. He mowed my strawberry patch down because he was so psycho about it. So that's another thing. Even if you know the people and their family, it doesn't mean they make good neighbors. Thankfully, I can't see the road from my back porch. It's very secluded back up in here. So you can see where my driveway meets the road and what I'm talking about. My driveway is my driveway. The road is shared, and then that road has so many feet back is considered the right-of-way. And so when I say I mow the right-of-way, it's just a small strip of land next to the driveway that I keep mowed. Also, it's a little different. This is my front porch I'm on right now, and as you can see, anyone going by, I can see them. My current neighbor is renting the house next door where the hoarder used to live. The issue now is they have 15 to 20 people coming up every single day. So that's just another consideration. You might think you're getting a very quiet piece of property when you have a right-of-way situation, and that could be the farthest thing from the truth. You could actually end up with a busier piece of property, depending on who your neighbors are. The other thing is, one day I saw a young man walking up here, and he doesn't live here. I don't even know who he is. And I asked him, who are you? And he says, oh, I am visiting the neighbor. And I said, well, why are you up here? This is private property. And he said, oh, so-and-so told me I could come up here and play in your yard. Well, that's not right. This is my yard. The laws here for children are, if someone is on your property and they are a minor and they get hurt, it doesn't matter if you have a no trespassing sign or not, you can still be sued. You're liable for their injuries on your property. Therefore, I don't want kids up here playing around. Neighbors are neighbors, no matter where you live. The good, the bad, it's all the same everywhere. Having a private road isn't all that it seems to be. There's a small beach near my house. There's parking. There's some chipmunks playing down there. There's parking for about 10 cars, and then there's an overflow lot across the street where there's a restaurant as well. And there is a house way off of the side of the beach, which is about a mile or so drive. So they have about a mile long private road. And this summer, while I was at the beach, I noticed a new sign that was constructed there, and it said, do not block the private road. And I could only imagine, with all the public people going to that parking lot and parking their cars, and all the public trying to get to the beach, I'm sure they get tons of people walking up their road or parking in front of their road, and oh, what a nightmare that must be. So I'm actually thankful I live here and not something like that. That would be worse. Before you sign that deed, though, make sure you know what the ramifications are of owning property on a private road, owning property on a shared driveway, and owning property with a right-of-way situation. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.